So I'm back out here today at Westbury Acres, and of course it is windy. You know, it's pretty much going to be the norm most of the time. We actually have a very, very windy state. I don't have a lot of trees around here yet, so there's not much of a windbreak whatsoever. But I figured today you'd probably want to know what's going on with this whole seating blanket thing. And honestly, this did not look like this yesterday, so let me explain. We got 3 inches of rain last week. It's been really, really dry, so we needed that. And I thought I was going to be okay because it was withstanding all of the wind and everything just fine. But as soon as it got soaked, if you think about a paper towel, it's very rigid until it gets really wet and then it tears easily. And then that's pretty much exactly what happened with this. At all of the seams where I had it stapled, it just ripped right through those because of course we got 35-mile-per-hour wind after that rainstorm and everything was soaked. I was trying to decide if I was going to do anything with that or just say this project was kind of done for, but Kelsey and I did spend a couple hours yesterday putting this all back in. This is going to be the last time we try, because if it doesn't hold this time, then it's just not going to hold. I think the hat backwards works a little bit better in the wind, but what I was going to say, essentially the verdict is still out on these things. Now this is only one brand and one thing that I've tried, so before I make a judgment as a whole, I'd probably like to try a few other things. But in a situation like this, I just want to let you know what's going on with it. It's not going to be worth it if they're not going to stay in place. And I will say I did get good germination under here at 6 days, which, considering the lack of sun intensity during this time of year and the fact that it was decently warm for a few days but still getting pretty cold at night, I definitely feel like it made a difference. I have some areas, that straw blanket actually right next to it, that I still don't really see any germination in, and that just had annual rye underneath it. So those two things are right next to each other. I watered them the same, and I noticed that this did germinate a lot better. So in terms of that, it has worked, but if they're not going to stay in place, if they're going to rip and I have to keep trying to fix them, then it's just not going to be worth it. Just a little bit bigger in here than my last garage. So I thought I'd also give you a final look at some of the plots before the real cold hits. So let's take a look at things and see how everything ended up for this fall. So this right here was a no-cover seed test. And also it was not watered other than the couple times that we got rain. So I'm planning this to be my dormant seeding test spot, at least one of them. I might also break the ground right next to it and do a bare ground dormant seed here yet. Once we get close to the time frame when it looks like it might actually snow and stay cold. So stay tuned for all that stuff yet. I'm gonna do some dormant seeding on this area yet this winter. So same type of method over here. This was all just broadcast. This is tall fescue. This is gonna look really good next year as long as we get some good moisture in the spring. Let it start to fill in. I could do a slight overseed on it, but looks really good for the seeding, just broadcasting it down and getting about just 2 rainfalls on it. And I did the exact same thing all through here, all the way down, just broadcast seed and let it just come in and grow. This is my dense shade section, so you'll see these 2 trees up here next year. This area right through here is not going to get much sunlight at all during the whole middle of the year season, so that's going to be my testing spot for the dense shade. This right here is perennial ryegrass, and then there's a line right in the middle, and I have Kentucky bluegrass on that side, and then all of this stuff that was seeded outside of there is tall fescue. Things are getting close to dormancy down here on the elite shade, but I think this might be an area that I also do a light dormant seed at some point, or I can just do it in the spring because I don't use any pre-emergent down here considering the sunlight, and I just have not seen any need to use it. That's how this shade area is looking. I didn't think I was gonna have to mow again, but for some reason it has grown just slightly in the last couple days, so you know it's gonna be really rough for me to have to do this final mow. It's not something I'm looking forward to at all. Update on this machine right here for those of you who were wondering. I actually did not get a chance to get it in for service yet. It does have a slight hydraulic leak on the pump on the right side, so I'll have to check that out. But otherwise, it's been cutting fine. Once we got past the flush of that growth in the early fall, you know, this ryegrass, no matter what I cut it with, it usually does not cut super clean when it is in that sort of really flushed out mode. I actually do need to sharpen the blades again, but I'll do that during the winter time. And I think that with zero turns, from what I'm hearing from a lot of people, from what I've seen from a lot of people, I've been really spoiled with reel mowing for a long time, so I'm used to that type of cut. And also, this Milwaukee push mower cuts really well, and so I've been kind of spoiled with that thing too. Not saying that I can't achieve that with a zero turn, but it might just take me some time to figure out the best one that I might need to get eventually, or maybe it's not a zero turn, maybe it's something else out on these plots. I just need something fairly small so that I can get in and out of them, but I'm going to continue push mowing with that Milwaukee on some of the main plots anyway, just because I like the walk and it gives it a really good cut. Looking down the line here, you can see I'm still seeing just some slight fraying on that blade right there, and somewhat into the middle, but some of the times the middle is just the fact the way that the three blades spin, you're seeing a different pattern there, but work in progress to figure that all out. I also didn't anticipate having to reel mow these again, but they have grown quite a bit. Color is just outstanding with 2 apps of the greener G on this. And also I think keeping them short, I have every grass type here. I have rye, bluegrass, fine fescue, and over in that corner, tall fescue. So I'll show you these close up, but keeping them somewhat short I think is letting the soil stay warmer from whatever sunlight we do get. This middle strip also has not had as much fertilizer, so I wanted to show those 2 things. And then look at this spot right here. That was a spill of the fertilizer that went on here, so you can definitely tell what it does and how green it is. Alright, so here is the fine fescue reel mode. It is, as the name says, extremely fine, very, very soft. Much darker than where I'm mowing it down in the shade area, so keeping it tight, and that fertilizer has done a great job of getting some amazing color out of this. This is tall fescue at 3/4 of an inch. And looking at it here cut like that, it does not look all that different from the bluegrass plot. You can see here, these blades of grass are definitely does not look as thick or wide bladed as when you let it get really tall. These elite varieties are much better looking than the old stuff, no doubt about that. And overall, I just really like the way that this looks. So here's the bluegrass right after looking at that tall fescue. Personally, like I said, I do not notice much of a difference. Bluegrass usually takes quite a while to mature, but I've been so happy with this season that we're about 12, 13 weeks into this, and I already have a pretty full looking plot here, so that's impressive for this bluegrass. And of course the rye, just somewhere in between that fine fescue and the tall fescue in terms of texture. It's not quite as fine, but still very, very soft. This one is obviously the most mature, the most full, because ryegrass is just like that. This right here is the elite ryegrass. This is probably right around 3 inches right now as far as height of cut. I'm going to try to bring it down next year. I'd like to be closer to 2 inches or so for the most part. I mean, it's been fine, but as you remember, during the middle of the summer, there's a lot of stalks out in here, and the higher that it went, the more that I saw some of that issue. So we'll see how next year goes, but stay tuned for all that stuff. This next one, which I haven't mowed yet, this is the fescue right here. And I've talked about this the last couple seasons, but having fescue at my house in the backyard and then also in this plot, that plot over there that's next to the real mowed stuff, it acts a lot more like a warm season grass in some senses. So middle of summer, it's usually doing pretty well as long as you have a good handle on some things and are watching for some fungus and all that. But right now, what you'll notice that as soon as it starts to get some heavy frosts on it and it starts to get really cold at night, it starts to get more dormant than these other grasses are so far. So the bluegrass and the ryegrass don't seem to mind that so much, but this right here, it also could be fed slightly more, but it just doesn't love the cold as much as the other ones do. And finally, we have the bluegrass rye here and the all bluegrass that you saw me mowing from the other side. Both of these responded fantastic to those Greener G apps. I'll see if I have some video from before as to what these look like before I did those fertilizer apps, but they have come to life with color and with the cooler weather, definitely loving that part too. Over here, I've got the micro clover. I'll give you one more look at that before we get into next season. And right next to that, I've got the tall fescue with the micro clover mixed in. Give you another look at that one. And then I have the mono stand of bewitched Kentucky bluegrass right over here, which is still slow to grow in, but by next spring I can tell it's going to be really starting to thrive. Let's go take a look at the drought testing plots and just see where they're at going into winter. All right, some interesting things going on over here, specifically with some of these plots having tons of weeds in them. I believe this is pennycress. We'll see what happens when it gets into spring, but this is the fine fescue plot right here, but I'll just have a bunch of weed control work to do in that if that all comes back. But then you compare that to the plot right next to it, ryegrass, basically nothing in that plot except a couple on the fringes. So because this matures so fast all the time, it gets a head start, and especially on bare soil, it does a really good job of keeping out a lot of weeds because it grows in fast, it matures fast, and keeps all that other stuff out. Now, same thing, you look at a bluegrass plot, this is actually doing better than the fine fescue, but there's a lot of weeds here on the edge. Just doesn't mature that fast, allows a lot of the weeds to come in. This fescue plot looks pretty good, not too bad, just some stuff on the fringes. This is a mono stand of turf type tall fescue, and this is a mono stand as well. I'll tell you about all those next year. This one I seeded probably 2 or 3 weeks later than this other one, and it got hit with a couple hard freezes. I was a little concerned about that, but it actually came through fine and just isn't quite as mature as everything else, but it doesn't look like it's going to have any issues. This whole sea of green over here is annual ryegrass, which I just threw down, drug it in slightly, and let it be, and that's the kind of cover you can get out of it, which is exactly what I wanted it for. Well, it looks like the sun decided to come out for the last few minutes here of the work today.